Hello, I'm Mary Helen Hackney. I'm a medical oncologist at VCU Massey Cancer Center. Welcome to this presentation, one of our annual lectures on cancer myths. There's always questions that people have. We usually do this in person, but due to circumstances, we are doing it by tape today. And we're glad you're able to join us and watch us. Please feel free to send questions to us at Massey Cancer Center if you do have them down the road. So let's get started, because cancer myths, there are a lot of things out there that people get worried about with cancer, and there's a lot of misinformation. And so, the first thing I always want to tell people is getting cancer doesn't mean you're going to die from cancer. And that may sound kind of simplistic, but we're seeing more and more people not dying of cancer. And we have more and more treatments available for people who get cancer. If you look at the American Cancer Society statistics, 1 out of 2 men, and 1 out of 3 women in their lifetime, assuming they live to age 90, are going to be touched by cancer. That does not mean they're going to die of cancer. It means they get cancer. But we can treat many cancers these days. I think it's also important to remember that the survivorship numbers are growing. They estimate right now that there are about 17 million cancer survivors in the US at this point in time. And they figure that by 2030, we're probably going to have something like over 22 million cancer survivors. We're getting older people get cancer, but more and more people are surviving. And so those are very promising numbers. Also, the American Cancer Society recently published data that showed that the death from cancer rate is actually dropping over the past decade, so that we are seeing fewer people dying. So one of the first myths I want to eradicate is that cancer equals death. It does not equal death. There are many opportunities to treat it. There are many opportunities to prevent and catch it early. So that is what our mission is to reduce death and reduce problems from cancer long term. So first myth, we're going to put that one aside. Second myth is that there's nothing you can do to prevent yourself from getting cancer. Well, there are things that you can do so that you don't get cancer. Some of them are not easy things, but you're not obligated to get cancer just because you're out there living and you're getting older. Many people we find don't have any family history of cancer. And that's one of the other myths. They say, I can't get cancer. No one in my family got cancer. And I went, well, that doesn't mean you can't get it. You still could get cancer. So we have to think about what we can do in our lifestyle and in our environment to help reduce those risks of getting cancer. So let's think about that a little bit. How do you reduce your risk of getting cancer? Probably the first biggest thing is no tobacco. Don't smoke, don't chew, don't sniff tobacco products. There are multiple different cancers associated with tobacco: lung cancer, bladder cancer, head and neck cancer. So tobacco, it's a no-no in all forms. There's no safe tobacco. Limit alcohol consumption. Increasingly, we know that alcohol consumption for women, more than a drink a day, for men, more than 2 drinks a day, can increase the risk of some cancers. So limiting your alcohol consumption is another good thing to help reduce the risk of cancer. Weight management. Now, a lot of us are challenged with this right now. With COVID, we may be eating more, cooking more, not exercising as much. But we know that obesity, particularly as we get older, can increase the risk of some cancers. In women, we see obesity contributing to breast cancer, to cancer of the uterus. In men, possibly colon cancer. So again, trying to keep a healthy weight. You don't want to be too fat, you don't want to be too thin, but you want to be weight appropriate, and that helps reduce your cancer risk. Limit sun exposure. And we go, most of us are finding little skin cancers or little abnormalities on our skin as we get older. A lot of that's the sun exposure we had back when we were teenagers. In our 20s, when we all worship the sun. But again, now, think about limiting your sun exposure. Teach your children, teach your grandchildren, limit your sun exposure, wear sunscreen. That helps reduce your cancer risk. So it's another active thing you can do. And then probably the last thing I would say on some of those actions to work against cancer is think about the HPV vaccine, human papillomavirus vaccine. It is given to teenagers, and they have found that it helps reduce the risk of cervical cancer in women, other types of penile cancer in men, and might actually help reduce some other types of cancer. So here's a vaccine that's very easy to take, and we strongly recommend that teenagers get it. So support your family members getting this, helping reduce your risk of getting cancer. Now, if you can reduce your risk, that's one way, okay? Then the other thing you want to think about is, what else can you do that you can't, so you won't get cancer? Well, maybe you can't prevent cancer, but maybe you can detect it early. So you're going to think about getting pap smears for women for cervical cancer, and there's age-appropriate guidelines. You're going to think about breast imaging, mammography for women. Again, there are age-appropriate guidelines. Colon cancer affects both men and women, and in Virginia is our second biggest cancer killer. And so getting a colonoscopy or doing other screening for colon cancer, very critical. So those are, top 3 cancers that we can screen for, catch early, and by catching early, less risk of having long-term problems with it. Makes a difference. Other cancers that we can screen for that you may want to talk to your doctor about, prostate cancer screening. There are different rules for that. We're not going to go into it in details today. Skin cancer screening, particularly if people have had high sun exposure. And lung cancer screening. If you ever were a smoker, then it's important to be able to, there is a new type of CT scan or a limited CT scan to screen high-risk people for lung cancer. And we know that if we catch it early, then they're less likely to die of it or less likely to have complications of it. So can you do something? So the myth is, can you do something to prevent or early detect? Yes, you can. So there are ways to do it. So let's think of another myth. So we're going to try to catch the cancer early and hopefully not have to worry about it. But sometimes we do find cancers. Myths are that clinical trials are only for a last resort, that you got to be on your deathbed to get a clinical trial. And that's a big myth, because here at Massey Cancer Center, we offer probably over 150 clinical trials for cancer patients. And they're at all stages. Sometimes the trial is trying a new type of surgical technique. Sometimes it's trying a new type of radiation technique. Maybe it's a new mixture of chemotherapy or a way of helping wellness afterwards. We had a weight loss clinical trial for a while for women with breast cancer. So clinical trials can be variable, and they can be offered at any time during a cancer journey. And so be open-minded and ask, is there something out there that can make a difference for you or your loved one if you have a cancer diagnosis? And don't be afraid of a clinical trial. We don't do things with taking care of patients that have placebos. We have got to treat the patient first and foremost with the best medicine. And there may be other ways we can add to their care. So don't forget about trials. Okay, so let's think about some more myths. I've got a bunch written down here, so I'm sort of going down my list. Is there a magic diet for cancer? I wish there was a magic healthy diet that says this is the way you don't get cancer. We don't have a great anti-cancer diet out there. What we recommend is sort of that good healthy diet that we're telling everybody to do. Not too much fat, more vegetables, more fruits and grains, less fatty meats, limit your alcohol, no tobacco. That sort of heart healthy diet is really a good anti-cancer diet too. Keeping the weight appropriate. So those are the best things for you. Another myth, chemotherapy is always bad and it's always horrible. Well, I don't think anybody walks into my office asking for chemotherapy or any of the immune therapies or such, but we have many more ways that we can take care of people during cancer. And I've had some people be so scared of chemotherapy that they don't want to treat their cancer. And, through research and through pharmacy companies doing research and such, we've got a lot more ways to take care of people after a diagnosis. And We have better nausea medicines. We have better ways of administering the drugs. Some drugs are now given as shots rather than IV drips. Some drugs are given as pills. So there are a lot more opportunities. And so don't, throw something out before you've actually asked the right questions, because we can get people through chemotherapy safely, and it can make a huge difference in longevity and longevity without cancer. So that's sort of, people just get so scared. They remember the bad things and the horror stories of the past. And we have many fewer of those horror stories now, much fewer, much fewer. So please don't neglect your care. What else is out there that people think about? Well, I probably get asked at least once a week that I can't eat any sugar because sugar is going to feed my cancer. And our whole body depends on sugar in some version or another. Glucose is our main feeder for our for our body, for our cells. The problem with sugar, particularly a lot of the sugars that are found in some of those good things like cakes and candies and stuff, is that there are a lot of empty calories there, and they add to fat, and they add to diabetes or blood sugar being out of control. And we know that obesity increases your risk of cancer. We know that people whose blood sugar is not under good control may have some increased risk of cancer. So sugar is not the culprit just by itself. It's really what the sugar does down the road. So if somebody who has cancer or wants to prevent getting, reduce their risk, wants to have a piece of birthday cake, that's safe, okay? You don't deny that pleasure. The key is putting it in moderation and putting it in the global concern of how your body health is. If you're at appropriate weight, your blood sugar's under good control, yes, you can have that piece of pie. But none of us need to be eating lots of extra calories that don't have some nutrition behind them. So sugar is not the culprit that everybody touts it out to be. It's the weight, it's the fat, it's the lack of proper nutrition that really is our culprit here. I mentioned one myth a little bit earlier. I'm going to bring it up again here, is that people will say, well, no one in my family has cancer, so I'm not going to get cancer. And when we look at people who have cancer, we find that most people who walk in our door with a new diagnosis don't have a family history. Right now, with genetics and genetic testing, only about 5, maybe 10% of people have an abnormality in their genetics that we can measure. And we do have some genetic family cancers for colon, for breast, that we can determine, and ovarian cancer is the third one. And so we can sometimes say, yes, this person's at higher risk. But we always ask questions about family, but we don't always find that history. And just not having it in your family doesn't mean you can't get it. I think it's also important, though, that you share your family history, because when you do share history, it may in fact impact how other members of your family get screened for cancer. So you go, well, nobody in my family has cancer. Then you start talking at the dinner table and you go, well, cousin Joe had prostate cancer and cousin Bill had pancreatic cancer. And now you've got a lump in your breast, and you go, well, wait a second, pancreatic and prostate and breast cancer can all be related in families. So it's important to know your history and know if that might influence, well, maybe I should start getting a screening test earlier. Maybe my mammogram needs to be earlier. If you're a guy with prostate cancer, maybe, or the history in your family of prostate cancer, maybe you need to start earlier. So family history doesn't protect you, but it might also give you that education piece to say, hey, go get checked out, because then you might be able to catch things earlier and might be able to make a difference. So do think about knowing your family history and what's going on. And there is genetic testing out there, which is important. in terms of being able to uh, determine if there is a high risk. And genetic testing, it's beyond that thing that's on TV, the 23andMe thing. It's a lot more finite and has a lot more information. And sometimes we can see things within families that we know we need to make a difference. So, do think about your family history. One of people ask me, what's the biggest risk of getting cancer? And really, it's getting older. Most of our cancers are seen in people as they age. We don't see many cancers in younger people. And so as we think about going forward, it's really a disease of the aging. And so that early detection can make a difference. But we can't change that we're getting older. So it happens to all of us. So that's, as we're thinking of some cancer myths, things to think about. But do know your family history. It helps make a difference. Now, I have a whole list here of things that people will come in, or that if you Google out on the internet, they'll say, oh, these things cause cancer. And, there are a lot of myths and theories. Obviously, we talked a little bit earlier about sugar, sugar directly feeding into cancer. It's not like gasoline on a fire. It's not directly feeding it. You've got to look at more at the global body. So let's think about what other cancer things are out there. And so, give you a list of things that do not cause cancer. But if you Google out enough, you might find some of these. A good resources to look at is the American Cancer Society website. They have some great information about myths of cancer. The National Cancer Institute website. One is cancer.gov, that's the National Cancer Institute. Cancer.org is ACS, American Cancer Society. And also American Society of Clinical Oncology, ASCO.org, all have sections on their websites about reducing your risk of cancer, myths about cancer, things that make a difference, things that don't. So don't hesitate to do a little bit of good investigation. Many of us can get on the keyboard and find these things now. So what doesn't cause cancer? So myths about it. Artificial sweeteners do not cause cancer. I know there's a great deal of concern years ago about a product called saccharin, but in general, the artificial sweeteners that are approved now have no cancer association. Deodorant, that comes up all the time with breast cancer, that deodorant causes breast cancer. No, deodorant doesn't cause breast cancer. There have been several great studies done. There's no increased incidence. If you want to smell sweet, you certainly can. And there's no problem with using deodorant and impacting your breast cancer risk. Now, sometimes people who've had surgery on their lymph nodes or on their breasts may not be able to wear it for a short period of time, but globally, you can use deodorant. Power lines. I remember being at American Cancer Society meeting one time, and somebody was protesting about power lines, these big transformer lines that go between buildings. And they said that people living underneath them had increased cancer risk. They've not seen that. That's not panned out to be true. We see cell phones. Everybody's got their cell phone nearby somewhere. Do cell phones cause cancer? So they postulate, people have gotten on the web and said that cell phones can cause either brain tumors or can cause cancer of the testicles in men, because men were carrying their cell phones in their pockets, and so there was nearby, or brain tumors because you were listening all the time. Neither is true, okay? They have not seen any risk of cell phones causing cancer, so we can put that aside too. Same thing goes with microwave ovens. That people have been concerned that being around a microwave oven could cause cancer. And we haven't seen that one pan out either. Now, there has been discussion that if you are heating food in microwaves, that you use microwave-safe plastics and glassware, that some of the plastics that aren't microwave-safe, that if you put that that in the microwave, there may be chemicals that leach out. We don't know what those effects are, so that they do urge that if you use a microwave, just use the appropriate product in a microwave. But microwaves themselves do not cause any cancer problems. Okay. Um, Other things out there that people think about in terms of causing cancer or contributing to cancer. Oops. We're good. We're good.
Sorry.
No, no, we're good. So just show you there's real work going on here. And I forgot to tell you, I am actually taping this in our new facility, our new building. So we're in the adult outpatient pavilion on Lee Street between 10th and 11th. So come see us in our new facility. We got parking and everything. It's lovely, and windows and all kinds of things here. So, and work is happening right down the hall here. So let's get back to our myths then. One of the ones you hear a lot about is, does surgery make cancer spread? And exposing cancer to air will make it spread. That's not true. And really the surgeons who when they're doing cancer surgery, they have very specific approaches to cancer so that they minimize any risk of spreading. Air doesn't make cancer spread. We think some of these myths came from when they used to do surgery, decades ago, many decades ago, and a surgeon would open up a patient, find cancer everywhere, close them up, not be able to do anything, and then then the patient died. So people then made the jump that opening up the patient made the cancer spread. Well, what was happening and what they have found in reports is that cancer was already bad. The cancer didn't worsen, but that's not how people viewed it. But surgery in contemporary world is done in very specific ways to minimize spread, to make sure you get all the tumor. And there are even very specific ways we biopsy cancers, so that you know that you don't spread it elsewhere. And sarcomas, testicular cancer, breast cancer, head and neck cancers all have very specific techniques so that you can really maximize getting the information you need without creating any further disturbances. So that that is a common one that comes up, and some people will refuse surgery on that basis. It really, if you need surgery, get the right surgery. There's also been discussion about hair dye causing cancer. Probably some of the hair dyes from many, many years ago, decades ago, there was a black hair dye that might have contributed a little bit to cancer, to leukemia types, but the new products that are out there should not be at risk. So if people need to color their gray, they certainly can. But again, it's just, there are a lot of concerns and worries about it. One of the other things that's out there that people have worried about is birth control pills. And do birth control pills cause cancer, or cause particularly breast cancer? Birth control pills may actually reduce your risk of getting ovarian cancer. There may be a minimal change of breast cancer, but when you stop the birth control pills, your breast cancer risk is the same as any woman your age or with your history. So we really don't see that birth control pills are not labeled as a cancer-causing agent. And so that's a good thing to know. As people think about, what are those things out there that they can reduce and what they can control. Is cancer contagious? No, but there are some viruses that do contribute to cancer. HPV that we mentioned earlier, HIV can cause some cancers, and hepatitis B and hepatitis C are associated with liver cancers. So those viruses in and of themselves can be contagious in certain settings, but the cancer is not contagious. And so if you're around somebody with cancer, you're not catching cancer from them. So I don't hear that one nearly as much as I used to, but every so often it still shows up. So, as we're looking about, how do we reduce our risk of cancer? So I kind of wanted, sort of coming to a sort of conclusion. Those are sort of some of the main cancer myths I sort of put together for everybody. I think the key to know is that the best thing to do is be informed. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to get a second opinion if you're not certain what's going on. A lot of people want to get rid of cancer. Unfortunately, some people make a lot of money off of selling all kinds of supplements and potions and notions, is what I sometimes say, that they say, oh, this will boost your immune system, this will prevent you from getting cancer. We don't know how a lot of those things work. We know some of them may actually create other side effects, but the best thing to do is to get your care at a proper cancer center, get the right information, look at the good websites. I mentioned a couple of them earlier: American Cancer Society, cancer.net, ASCO.org. Look at good, the National Cancer Institute's the other one. Look at good websites so that you get the right information. And if you're not certain or you're worried, ask, okay? We have cancer death rate dropping because people are getting good information and getting good treatment. But it behooves you to do that. Even in the time of COVID, we are still taking care of cancer. Cancer has not stopped for COVID. And so I urge you to be sure you don't neglect those things that can make you live a long time: your colonoscopy, your mammogram, your pap smear, your prostate cancer screening, your lung cancer screening. All of those things are important so that we can continue to improve those statistics of declining cancer death. So, everybody says, well, hey, why can't we cure it? Because it's not one disease. It's a lot of diseases, a lot of different triggers for why cancers happen. And there's not going to be one switch we can flip and turn it all off. But research is going to help us save lives. More and more lives are being saved. So be a part of it. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Remember, we're at VCU Massey Cancer Center in our new building, the adult, I keep wanting to say adult oncology pavilion, but it's really the adult outpatient pavilion with resources here. And we have a number of other sites around Central Virginia. So please see us and we'll be glad to help take care of you or your loved ones. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.